From the BBC World Service, in association with ABC and Akashvani, this is Stumped.
Hello and welcome to Stumped, your intercontinental hit of news, features and debate from the quirky world of cricket. I'm Eleanor Oldroyd in grey and drizzly London, where it's just starting to feel a little bit spring-like, and the Champions Trophy is upon us already and it comes at you thick and fast. So we'll get into that a little bit. But yeah, looking forward to watching a bit of cricket eventually in this country when the seasons turn, Jim, and your autumn turns into winter and our spring turns into summer.
It's always summer here, always summer. The Sheffield Shield continues towards a very good finish. There's something called the Champions Trophy on, but no one really cares much about that at the moment here because they reckon the Australian team's playing so badly without their star players. But we might start to take notice of the BBC commentary we're getting if Australia can win. But they've got to get past England, South Africa and Afghanistan. I'm not sure how well they'll go. But the cricket season just keeps going on.
Well, there's certainly a little more interest in the Champions Trophy here in India. I'm Charu Sharma for Akashvani in Kutta, Coorg, the coffee-going district of India, where the good news for the planters, and we're here at the estate because picking is going on, is that the coffee prices are booming, which, of course, is not so good news for the consumers. A lot of attention on the Champions Trophy, and, of course, the Women's Premier League is going on in India, so the women, too, are under the spotlight.
Well, we've got lots to get into in the show today. Coming up, we'll be hearing from South Africa's captain, Temba Bavuma. But first, as we've all said, the Champions Trophy is now well underway, with the hosts Pakistan suffering a big 60-run defeat to New Zealand. Now, it's the first ICC global event in Pakistan since 1996 due to safety concerns after a terrorist attack in 2009. And on last week's show, we spoke about the pressure on the host nation. But Jim, I mean, it was a bit of a whimper, really, wasn't it, for Pakistan with all the hype that's been surrounding them?
Pakistan are perennially mercurial, spasmodic, erratic, whatever you want to call them. And they didn't quite turn up as they needed to. And New Zealand are a pretty good side once they've got their mind on what they're about. They're a very harmonious group and they can play, as they showed, some very good cricket. And after a slow start, they made too many for Pakistan. So keep your eye on New Zealand. I mean, it's basically a knockout tournament, it seems to be. You only get 3 bites of the cherry and then you're into the semi-finals. So if you drop 1 game, you might be in trouble. 2, you're gone. And Pakistan could be struggling, even at home, to make it to the semi-finals.
And now they travel to Dubai, Charu, because of the political situation and the political situation between India and Pakistan. That's where India are playing that games. And I mean, that is an absolute must-win now for Pakistan.
It does seem that India would hold all the aces. I'm trying very hard not to be biased or partisan because nothing really worked out for Pakistan in their own territory with their faster bowlers. Imagine somebody like Haris Rauf going for 83 runs in 10 overs. That's terrible. They've got a couple of part-time spinners. Their batting, as always, is very crumbly. And in contrast, I do think India enjoy all the aces. And also the fact that they haven't had to travel. Their base is in Dubai. That's a big advantage. Pakistan have to travel, get used to those conditions, not particularly different, but, you know, there's a little bit of travel fatigue. And I can't see them rise to an extent where they might be able to beat India. So, rough times for Pakistan, that's for sure. Although I wish them well, particularly at home with big-time cricket returning. They need to showcase to the rest of the world that big-time cricket deserves to be in Pakistan. That's a bit of a pressure.
And I know England have enjoyed their test tours over there recently as well. And, you know, and I mean, yeah, it's you can... I haven't managed to go, unfortunately. I'd love to go, but, you know, you can tell the passion for Test cricket in Pakistan. New Zealand, Jim, they seem to be the perennial, I don't know, you know, we underestimate them so much, New Zealand, don't we? We talk them down. We don't sort of think, well, you know, they're the ones for the big occasion. But 2 centuries from Tom Latham and from Will Young as well. They know how to play this game, and they're now 4-0, as they say, against Pakistan in Champions Trophy meetings.
Yes, as I say, I think they're a real threat in this tournament. You just have to run a bit of form together over a few games and you're into the knockout phase. So they look to be well-tuned. They've been in that part of the world recently playing some pretty competitive cricket. So it would be no surprise to me if they're through to the next phase. But that's the one good thing about this tournament, even though it's only 8 of the teams, and one of those missing out, Sri Lanka, dusted Australia recently. So Australia will be relieved that they don't have to play them again. But yeah, I like the format of it, even though it's probably lost its relevance as a sort of second string alternative to the 50-over World Cup every 4 years. And it does need to produce some good cricket, and as Charu mentioned, probably some very good audiences here for the event to gain some momentum. And one of the other issues in this part of the world, I don't know what's happening in other places, is that it's so far behind on a paywall with Amazon doing the television coverage that very few people will be able to see it.
I mean, the people who are able to see it will see England, Afghanistan, Australia and also South Africa in one group, and they're being led, South Africa, by their influential captain Temba Bavuma. Now, you may remember a few weeks ago on Stumped, we were joined by the South Africa head coach Shuki Conrad, and he spoke to us a lot about the influence of their captain. So let's hear from the man himself. BBC South Africa reporter Eshlin Vidan has been to see Bavuma, and asked him why cricket is so important to him.
So, I mean, cricket was always something that featured in my life. Sport, just in general, was something. I played pretty much anything that had to do with the ball. But cricket, I guess later on in my development years, kind of took over. I always had the passion for the game. I always wanted to see myself competing against other players, against the best, wherever I was. You know, I was fortunate enough that I've been able to get to this point. A lot of work went into it. I was fortunate that I had a good support system behind me, who, I guess, supported me along the way.
And you were coming up the ranks at a very different time in South African history. And at that time when you were growing up, a lot of guys like, for example, Hashim Amla and Alviro Peterson would have been making their way into the Proteas ranks. And these players have spoken about hurdles which they initially faced in terms of having to prove themselves. So when you were coming up the ranks, did you face any similar challenges to what they had faced?
Yeah, I mean, the element of proving yourself is, I guess that was always there. There was always the thought that you had to be better than the other person next to you, and you had to do a lot more than the other person. So from a role model point of view, guys like Hashim Amla, guys that we looked up to, guys like Ashwell Prince, you know, those are guys that we looked up to. From an international point of view, I try to model my game around a guy like Sachin Tendulkar, and I guess the older you are, the more you appreciate how he was still able to perform the way that he did, considering all the pressure and expectation that he would have encountered coming from a nation like India.
Well, that was the South Africa captain, Temba Bavuma there. I mean, Charu, he comes across as a very calming presence, doesn't he? What makes him such a good captain, do you think, for the Proteas?
Well, I can't even imagine the kind of pressures that he's gone through and the responsibility of it all. He's mentioned enough times, and we all know that he's been the first in many ways. So, you know, before we get to his captaincy, just the fact that he had that weight to bear of being a top-level batsman, not easy in Australia, being, you know, from where he is. And of course, the fact that he also understands the pressures of Sachin Tendulkar is slightly different, though, because Tendulkar didn't really suffer from any colour barrier, as it were. But it must be 10 times the pressure for Temba Bavuma to tolerate all of that, to have withstood all of that, and yet do enough to star, to become the captain. So it's not just the batsmanship, it's to get to lead a country like South Africa with all its cricket tradition. It's been just an incredible journey for him. I do think that a lot of it is not just because of his batting. He's been up and down on that score, but because of his demeanor. To have somebody calm, in control, he's done phenomenally well.
From the BBC World Service, this is Stumped on Akashvani.
Well, finally, the India Sportswoman of the Year award was announced this week, with Olympic shooter Manu Bhaker crowned the winner. But it was retired Indian cricketing legend Mithali Raj who received the Lifetime Achievement Award. Mithali captained India for 18 years and is still the highest run scorer in international cricket, with 10,868 runs to her name. Before the ceremony, she spoke to the BBC's Ishadrita Lahiri.
What about cricket kind of made you feel like, okay, this is what I want to do, or this is my sport? Well, I don't think I even had that in mind because I just woke up to like a number of boys, young boys playing the sport in a big ground. And I would only see these boys running behind the ball, having the bat in hand and playing. So I told my father, I also want to give it a try. But he said that was not for girls because do you see any girls here? So he said, so that is not for girls, is what he said. But interestingly, my brother's coach, he saw me coming every day in the morning at 6. So he said, let me at least throw a few tennis ball at her and see, what she has. So looking at my brother, looking at those boys, probably I picked up something and. Whatever I showed, he was quite moved by that. He felt that I had a bit of potential in me, and that's when he told my father. He said, "Your son is not very serious about it, but your girl shows some potential of probably playing for country if you invest in her."
You were training in Bharatnatyam
Yes.
when you were younger.
Yeah.
And at some point, you had to choose between whether or not you want to continue with Bharatnatyam or whether you want to continue with cricket.
Yeah.
And of course, given the kind of lifestyle you have in cricket, you can't do both. So that decision when you had to take, was that a difficult decision to make?
Cricket happened to me, but dance was something I took interest to enroll myself into the classes. Every weekend I would go for dance classes. Cricket happened later. And for a while, I tried to manage both. My parents tried to manage both. It was very difficult because every time it was like a tug of war between like dance and cricket. Both required my commitment, my time, and both were very different field altogether, different profession. And every time I happened to choose cricket over dance because that's what my father wanted. My cricket coach wanted. Sometimes the cricket coach and the dance teacher would have a little bit of a fight because I was their best student, they felt. And, each wanted part of me.
Anything from Bharatnatyam that you took into cricket?
We had to take a choice. And by then I was already in the probables of the World Cup in 1997. The World Cup happened in India. So I was the only one from the state. And my father felt like she's already come to that level just a step before, wearing the India jersey. So he felt, I should, continue with cricket. In dance, there has to be a synchronization of your footwork, your movements with the beat, and your hand movement, your head, your expressions. So everything goes into it. So I was able to study my body much better when I was learning cricket.
There were, of course, a lack of facilities in women's cricket. You weren't getting as much money, the kind of facilities that your male counterparts were getting. So if you could tell us that some of the struggles that you had to face at that point.
Despite being international players, there would still be access to just cement tracks or, rough grounds, the grounds with pebbles and all of that. Turf wicket was just a week before we played international level. So until then we would play on matting and then we would adjust to turf wicket. Finance, I would say there was not a penny in the sport. All those players who've played cricket until we got into BCCI, until BCCI took us under their wing, I think they have played it only for the just pure joy of playing for India and enjoying the sport.
What is your message for young girls who are coming in, not just into cricket, but into sports today and find it difficult from their family side, financially, to make it?
I would just say that structure your way of achieving your goal. Yes, there will always be hardships. Everybody has to go through challenges. It's not like someone who's born in a very affluent family doesn't have. They also have their own challenges, but in a very different capacity. Everybody has to deal with it. As long as you have the will to keep pegging at your goal, trying to achieve it. Other variables should not matter. As long as you're happy in the path that you have chosen or having ambitions which people have never seen anyone else achieve it, but you have that ambition, I think one should go and, give the best.
Well, that was India legend Mithali Raj with a very inspirational message there. Charu, just give us an indication of how much of a legend she is in India, because she was really the face, wasn't she, of Indian cricket in the women's game for years during her career.
Well, not just years. Let's use the term decades, because she herself said started out in 1997 or so. It's a long time back. There were a few high achievers, but they played so little. The visibility, the media was so minuscule that for somebody to think of making it a career was possibly the wrong choice at that point of time. And I have no doubt that she would have had a few years where she thought, well, why don't I stick to dance? But she also made a very good point. I didn't think about it, that all the poise and the balance and everything that's required in that form of dance in India, it's one of the classical dance formats, it probably translates onto a pretty steady position on the pitch as well. But she was certainly the mainstay, batting-wise, for very long. And she had an old classic style. It's such a shame that India, and perhaps even most of the other teams in the world, did not play enough test match cricket for the women, because that's where she would have, without question, excelled.
Jim, we talk about the dominance and the leadership as well of this current Australia side and setting new standards all the time. But I mean, Mithali Raj probably led the way in lots of ways, even without that support that Charu is talking about, from the Indian establishment. She was a real trailblazer.
Yes, and she still seems to be an item in the Women's Premier League at the age of 42. I was just doing the maths. So she must have come into the Indian team as a 14-year-old. It's a remarkable record of persistence and durability for her to survive. And the one message to me that comes through very strongly from that interview, particularly if you're going to be a batter, get out there and start dancing, right? Get your feet moving. I enjoyed listening to her. She's very eloquent, and she's clearly got a big future in the game as a mentor, coach, and the rest of it. So a remarkable, absolutely remarkable career.
Well, that's all we've got time for on this week's Stumped for Akashvani. Don't forget you can follow us on X. We are at BBC WS Sport, and use the hashtag BBC Stumped. And check us out on YouTube too. Go to BBC World Service YouTube. My thanks to Charu Sharma, Jim Maxwell, and to all of you for listening. Speak to you soon. Bye.
Stumped is a BBC Sport production for the BBC World Service in association with ABC and Akashvani.